right, good morning. Get back here and get that wide angle view, right? Capture everybody in. All right, it's good to be here. So we're in lesson 4 still yet. Hopefully we'll finish that this morning. I know last week we were talking about the instructions that Ahab had received, and then he had decided to do things his own way in dealing with King Vineyard of Syria. And God has told him what's going to take place with him. In chapter 20, verse 42, it says here, "And he said unto him, Thus saith the Lord, because thou hast let go out of thy hand a man whom I appointed to utter destruction. He says, Therefore thy life shall go for his life, and thy people for his people." So not only is God proclaiming He's going to touch Ahab, He's going to touch him generationally also. So that kind of lets us know sometimes that we can do things, and it affects. I always say this, what I do as a parent can affect my children, and it does. And what a leader does, it affects the nation, doesn't it? And we saw that, if you watched the news late last night, our nation as a whole, we struck Iran. Well, that affects every one of us, doesn't it? And I hope it's to a good effect. Personally, I think it was the right thing to do, but it will affect all of us. So we need, and that's why I mentioned Israel. We need to pray for Israel, their leaders, their people, and we're already seeing the missile attacks come back. Again, they started back last night, but God has protected Israel, and He will continue to protect Israel. So I'm thankful for that. But an example here of a man's disobedience to God, and it's a good example, I think, of God's long suffering toward an individual. It said there in verse 43, it says, "And the king of Israel, being Ahab, went to his house heavy and displeased, and came to Samaria." So God got his attention. When somebody tells you they're going to take your life, and it's God in particular, you can kind of put some confidence in that they're telling you the truth. This thing's shrinking, or I'm shrinking, or getting taller. But we're going to start this morning in chapter 21 of 1 Kings. And we'll look at, it's almost like God changes gears here on us, but I think He gives us a very interesting story. He gives us a piece of history. And that's what we've seen a lot through this lesson is a lot of the history of the nation of Israel. And I think we're going to see another part of that history. But we're going to see something, I think, this morning about the character of Ahab. What kind of person he really was. I think in a sense we kind of know, but I think God wants us to really see who He is and see that God is just in how He continues to deal with him. He's gave Ahab opportunities, and Ahab will appear to make things right, but he just doesn't seem to get it right. I couldn't help but think about the city of Nineveh. God was gracious there, and He stopped that destruction. But you read a couple of books over, and Nineveh ended up being destroyed, didn't it? The city. They had revival, but it didn't last. And I think maybe sometimes that Ahab, he had that maybe a little bit of a personal revival, but it wasn't long lasting. But in 1 Kings chapter 21, verse 1, it says, "And it came to pass after these things that Naboth the Jezreelite had a vineyard which was in Jezreel, hard by the palace of Ahab king of Samaria." I was curious, about the name Naboth, and I looked it up. If I understood correctly, his name means fruits. I thought, well, that's fitting because he has a vineyard, and so this is something that apparently he deals in. It's always interesting to see how God, the names that He gives people, He has a purpose, in that, and your name is important. I think my first pastor, he told us to be careful in misusing people's names, because that's who they are. It's a part of them, and that's true, isn't it? And Naboth's name, I believe, was a part of him. Also, I didn't look up Ahab. Maybe I should do that also. But we'll read on here in verse 2 of chapter 21, and it says, "And Ahab spake unto Naboth, saying," now notice his insolence here. He doesn't ask. He says, "Give me thy vineyard. So he admits it's his property. And that, thankfully, that was one of the things that the Israelites still had. They had the ability to have property. But you go back into Samuel when the first king was to be, what's the word? Anointed, I guess would be the word. God told Israel what a king would do to their nation. And he would take their goods, he would take their young men, he would take their young women, he would take their lands for his use. So that's coming to be true here. So he says, give me thy vineyard that I may have it for a garden of herbs. He says, because it is near. So here he is, again, I think we're seeing kind of the character of Ahab. He says, because it is near unto my house. Now he kind of puts an olive branch out there. He says, and I will give thee for it a better vineyard than it. Or, if it seem good to thee, I will give thee the worth of it in money. So I think Ahab is already convinced in his mind that Naboth is going to bend to his will. He's going to pick on the little guy. And I think sometimes it's easy to judge a book incorrectly by its cover. And I think that's what Ahab will see he has done here. But Naboth had to make a hard decision. In verse 3, and Naboth said to Ahab, he said, the Lord forbid it me, that I should give the inheritance of my fathers unto thee. And so Naboth had to rely on God's instruction. And in the book of Leviticus chapter 25, reference is verse 23. And it talks about how that family property was to remain in the family, except in the cases of deep financial need. And then the year of Jubilee, I always thought this was interesting. In the 50-year Jubilee, all property was to be returned to the original owner. So this kept all property within the family line. So this type of possession to the Israelites was very, very special. And it was something that they were to keep. It wasn't something they were to be frivolous with and to just kind of give up just for the whim of, even for the whim of the king, just because he wanted it. So he responds. He has responded to Ahab's request. And he says, the Lord forbid it me, that I should give the inheritance of my fathers unto thee. So I think we're going to start, as we go down to this, we're going to start seeing, again, the character of Ahab more deeply. I thought it was interesting. I read a little bit of I guess it was a message, Alexander McLaren. And he talked about that in this lesson, you would see three different types of wickedness. You'll see weak and wicked. You'll see wicked and weak, wicked and strong, and wicked and subservient. So we'll see wicked and weak in Ahab, a very wicked man, but he was in a sense he was a very weak man, and we see that pointed out here in this part of the scripture. So Ahab requested Naboth's property. Naboth chose to obey God's law, and he refused to sell it or trade it. In chapter 21, verse 4, and Ahab came into his house, and here's his response. He came into, now when you read this, tell me what you think of. And Ahab came into his house heavy and displeased because of the word which Naboth the Jezreelite had spoken to him, for he had said, I will not give thee the inheritance of my fathers. And he laid him down upon his bed and turned away his face and would not eat bread. What do you think about when you hear that? Pouting. Is that what you said? Pouting. That's what he was doing, wasn't it? He was pouting. He didn't get his way. He was what? Spoiled brat. Well, there you go. That's another one. But you see, sometimes we don't lose some of our character traits, do we? And I think he had lived a life of getting his way, getting what he wanted. But yet he came up against somebody that was going to stand their ground and do what God would have him to do, and Naboth was right. But I'll tell you what, it's sad to say that sometimes even in the right, it would appear that you don't always come out the winner. I believe in the end, Naboth came out. He came out the winner of this story. It would not appear that way as we go on into it. But here we see that Ahab, he was very displeased about this. But he really had a problem So he wanted Naboth's vineyard. He admitted in verse 3 or 2 that it was Naboth's vineyard. So what sin do you think Ahab was committing here in wanting this other man's property? Covetousness. Yeah, he wanted something that was not his, didn't he? But there's a lot more to that sin. But we know it's a sin. So Abraham's problem was coveting, which is wanting something so much. Now I think it goes deeper. It's not just wanting something, but it goes to the point that it disturbs us. We lose sleep over us. It eats at us. We want something that is not ours so bad. Even though he had probably plenty of land, he could have had other things, but he wanted this, and it disturbed him. It broke up his inner peace. So when a person wants something he can't have, we use that. We already said they pout, they get angry, and we saw that Ahab, he was very upset, he was displeased. The 10th commandment, Exodus chapter 20, verse 17. Now this is our key verse also. But it says, "Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house, nor shalt thou covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's." I think that pretty well covers it, doesn't it? And here in Ahab, he was coveting what was not his. Now Ahab was wicked and weak. He hit a situation and he didn't know what to do with it. So he went and he pouted. But he told the story to somebody that was wicked and strong. Who was that? Jezebel. Boy, she's got a bad rap down through the centuries, hadn't she? And it's stayed consistent because she was not a good person. But she was wicked and strong. So Ahab, he was wanting Naboth's vineyard. It illustrates the sin of coveting. It's often, I thought this is so true, it made me think back to another story. But it's often the root sin. Now listen to what it lists here. It's often the root sin that leads to other sins such as stealing, lying, murder. Go on and go on. Who else do you think of that coveted something that was not theirs, and they stole, they lied, they murdered? Who else do you think of in the Bible? David. Everybody thinks of David. Why y'all pick on me? But David, that's who I thought of immediately, was that's what he did, wasn't it? He stole Uriah's wife. He lied about it. He had Uriah murdered. All those things. But why? Because he wanted something that was not his. Think about history. World War II. It was really started because of the sin of covetousness. Adolf Hitler, he wanted what's the word? Is Lebensraum. He wanted living space. He wanted more land. He wanted what was not his. And we went into a world war, and that was a big part of it. You would think, oh, it was all these things, but no, it's just a man that wanted something that was not his. And so sometimes it looks complicated, but really our human nature is not all that complicated. So it was the sin of covetousness that really headed Ahab down the course that he was not going to return from. So King David being a good example of that, I thought. Most people do not recognize coveting. To them, it means wanting something that belongs to somebody else. But again, we've already touched on, coveting is to want something so badly, if we can't have it, again, it disturbs our inner peace. And that's exactly what had happened to Ahab here. Now, that covetousness, it leads to another sin. And we idolize things. And we lose sleep. And that's probably what's happened to Ahab here. He's got this on his mind now, and it's all he thinks about. I want this, I want this, I want this. Y'all ever had something that you really, really wanted? I'm not saying you were coveting. It was just something new that you wanted to go purchase, and you thought about it, and you thought about it, and you worked towards it. Well, that's different from what was going on here with Ahab. So again, it led to another sin, and sometimes we think that we have to have certain things to be happy, and that's not true. I'm thinking I've got a little quote there at work from one of my signatures on emails. It says, success is getting what you want, and happiness is wanting what you get. And Ahab's mind, I think he just wanted to be successful. He wanted to get what he wanted. It might make him happy for a while, but it wouldn't make him happy continually. So he got to the place that it became idolatry to him. So if we don't get these items, whatever it might be, our inner peace is disturbed. Again, that's a little bit better definition of coveting. So things in life become more important, or they become all important. And I know to most people, things can bring some satisfaction. They can. Well, we all like things, don't we? We all like our little toys and things, and that we can have that give us enjoyment. But they're not long term, and sometimes they can be a problem with us. So this brings in life; it becomes all important. And again, to most people, things do bring great satisfaction. But after a person gets them, they later on discover that those things don't give true satisfaction. So that's true, isn't it? But it is. I've had a lot of things over the years, and most of them have wore out or broke, gone, or you're afraid to use them because they may break. So you won't find true happiness in things. Our lesson talks about how that many Christians covet, and they don't even realize it. And it talks about how even our nation that we're beset with the sin of coveting. I don't know. Maybe we are. We continue to want more, don't we? We do. And there's good and bad with that. You know, we do want more. That helps us to progress. But that shouldn't be the whole goal of our existence, is to want more. There's a lot more to life than that. So in order to resist temptation, our lesson tells us that the temptation to covet, we need to feed on the living bread, which is Jesus Christ. Then, if God chooses, he can bring these things into our lives in his time. So I think that's a good lesson for us. You know, it's nothing wrong with to want things, but, you know, we need to get on God's timeline. We need to get on God. Does God want us to have these things? Are we coveting? Are we making these things idols toward us or in our lives? So Ahab, being weak but wicked, again, I mentioned he goes to one who is wicked but strong. In verse 5, chapter 21, and it says, "But Jezebel his wife came to him and said unto him, Why is thy spirit so sad, that thou eatest no bread? And he said unto her," now notice his story here, how he tells it. He says, "And he said unto her, Because I spake unto Naboth the Jezreelite, and said unto him, Give me thy vineyard for money. He says, Or else, if it please thee, I will give thee another vineyard for it. And he answered, I will not give thee my vineyard." Well, he kind of forgot that little detail that Naboth, you know, why he wasn't going to give him the vineyard. Because he had every right to keep the vineyard. And Jezebel, his wife, said unto him, Dost thou not govern the kingdom of Israel? She wants to get on his pride a little bit, doesn't she? You know, aren't you the ruler of this great nation, and can't you have anything that you want? So she takes that and she uses his pride against him. And Jezebel's wife again said unto him, Dost thou now govern the kingdom of Israel? It's a question for him. And then she says, Arise and eat bread, and let thine heart be merry. But notice what she says. I will give thee the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite. Well, she's quick, isn't she? I believe she had already hashed a plan of how she was going to go about this, how she was going to get this that the king apparently couldn't get. So she plots on how to get Naboth's vineyard for her husband Ahab. In verse 8, what does she do? So we see that she is the wicked but strong, and here we're going to see the wicked and subservient. She's going to have letters written in Ahab's name and sealed them with his seal, and sent the letters unto the elders and to the nobles that were in his city dwelling with Naboth. So she gives order to have Naboth falsely accused. And she sends these letters to the elders of this city. And what do they say? They proclaim proclaim a fast and set Naboth on high among the people. Set two men of two men, sons of Belial. Well, who do you think of when you think of the name Belial? What does that reference? The devil. And that's what they were. They were devils, weren't they? They were going to bear a false witness towards Naboth. Sons of Belial to bear a witness against him, saying, and what was their accusation? Thou didst blaspheme